Daniel Rivera's hands were raw from scrubbing floors no one noticed, his reflection staring back from the wet tiles he polished night after night. Once, he had stood in boardrooms commanding respect as a rising international business strategist, but life had stripped him of everything: his career, his reputation, and nearly his will to fight, when he chose to raise his daughter alone after tragedy struck. Now, in the cold corridors of Whitmore Global, he was invisible, a ghost in a janitor's uniform. But ghosts sometimes know secrets no one else can see. And one day, the woman who dismissed him as just the janitor would hand him the very key to his redemption, without knowing it would change everything. For years, Daniel kept his head down, arriving early before sunrise and leaving long after the office lights dimmed. To the executives, he was background noise, someone who emptied trash and mopped spills. They never noticed the way he lingered near conference rooms, catching snippets of business talk, or how his eyes followed the financial charts projected on screens. Though his degree in international business hung forgotten in a box at home, his mind remained sharp, absorbing every deal, every misstep, every trend. Claire Whitmore, the young, assertive CEO of Whitmore Global, barely knew his name. To her, Daniel was another faceless worker in a sea of staff. She had fought her way to the top, and she wore her success like armor, elegant, confident, untouchable. Her focus was on securing a groundbreaking merger with Takeda Industries, a Japanese conglomerate that promised a $50 million expansion. Every meeting was high stakes. Every decision was a move in a ruthless game. One rainy Tuesday evening, while Daniel was cleaning the hallway outside the executive boardroom, Claire and her inner circle erupted in frustrated voices. The contract Takeda had sent over was complex, written in Japanese legal language that their translators struggled to fully interpret. The meeting dragged on, and when Daniel entered to collect empty coffee cups, Claire noticed him for the first time, not as a man, but as an interruption. "Careful with that mop, Rivera," she said sharply, barely glancing at him. Her tone carried the weight of someone used to obedience. Daniel nodded silently, but his eyes flicked toward the thick contract lying open on the table. Even at a glance, he could spot inconsistencies, phrases he remembered from his days studying Japanese trade law. Moments later, as the executives continued debating, Daniel whispered almost to himself, "That clause, it's not what you think." The room went silent. Claire raised an eyebrow. "Excuse me?" Daniel froze, realizing all eyes were on him. "Nothing, ma'am. Just that clause there." He pointed hesitantly. "It doesn't mean what the translation says. It's a restrictive covenant. Takeda would control your distribution channels entirely. You'd lose negotiating power." The executives exchanged skeptical looks. Claire tilted her head, amused. "Oh? And you're an expert now, Rivera?" Daniel's heart pounded. He could have stayed silent, retreated back into his anonymity. But something inside him refused. "I studied international business law and Japanese linguistics," he said quietly, "before this job." The room erupted in muffled laughter. One executive smirked. "Right. The janitor knows Japanese law better than our legal team?" Claire's lips curled into a cold smile. "Fine, Rivera. Since you're so confident, why don't you translate the entire contract for us? If you're right, maybe I'll reconsider your career path. If not, you'll stick to mopping floors." The words stung, but Daniel accepted the challenge without hesitation. That night, while others went home, he stayed in the dimly lit lounge, poring over the document line by line. Hours passed. Memories of late-night study sessions flooded back, his mentor, Dr. Hiroshi Sato, teaching him the art of reading between the lines in Japanese contracts, his daughter asleep beside him, while he translated complex legal texts to keep his mind sharp. By dawn, he handed Claire a meticulously translated version, complete with annotations. When she read it, her expression shifted from smugness to shock. His translation exposed hidden clauses that would have crippled Whitmore Global, handing Takeda Industries silent control over their operations. Instead of a merger, it was a trap. That morning, Claire summoned him to her office. For the first time, she looked at him not as a janitor, but as someone who had just saved her company from disaster. "You were right," she admitted reluctantly. "You've done what none of my team could. I owe you for this." Daniel simply nodded, emotion tightening his throat. "I only did what was necessary." He didn't know it yet, but that night had changed everything. The invisible janitor was no longer invisible. The morning after Daniel's remarkable translation, whispers spread like wildfire through Whitmore Global. Employees who had never spoken to him now exchanged curious glances as he walked by. The janitor who had saved the company. Rumors twisted the story, each version more dramatic than the last. But Daniel kept to himself, continuing his usual routine, mopping floors and emptying bins as though nothing had changed. Inside, though, he felt a spark he hadn't felt in years, a reminder of who he used to be. Claire Whitmore, however, was not one to let talent go unnoticed, even if she had underestimated it at first. That afternoon, she summoned Daniel to her office once again. Her sleek, glass-walled space on the top floor was intimidating, the kind of room designed to make people feel small. Daniel stood before her desk, his posture calm yet guarded. "I've reviewed your notes," Claire began, her tone more respectful than before. "Not only did you catch the trap Takeda set, but your analysis proposed a renegotiation strategy one hadn't considered." She leaned back, crossing her arms. "Tell me, Rivera, why are you scrubbing floors when you clearly have the mind of a strategist?" Daniel hesitated. "Life doesn't always go as planned. Years ago, I had a career in business. I lost it all when I chose to care for my daughter. Companies saw gaps in my resume and assumed I wasn't worth the risk." His voice softened. "I took whatever work I could to keep us afloat." For the first time, Claire's expression softened. There was something in his words, a quiet strength that disarmed her. "You sacrificed everything for your family," she said, almost to herself. Then, regaining her usual composure, she added, "Whitmore Global could use someone like you. But understand this, talent isn't enough here. Loyalty is everything." That same evening, Claire invited Daniel to sit in on a high-level negotiation call with Takeda Industries. The room was tense, executives lined up around the table, laptops open, waiting for the Japanese delegation to appear on screen. Claire gestured for Daniel to take a seat beside her, an action that drew surprised looks from the others. To them, he was still the janitor; to Claire, he was becoming something more. The video call began. The Takeda representatives spoke in polite but layered Japanese, each phrase carefully chosen. The official translator struggled, missing subtle implications. Daniel quietly leaned toward Claire, whispering translations that revealed hidden meanings, terms of control disguised as collaboration. At key moments, he signaled her to push back, offering counterpoints rooted in cultural understanding. His calm, precise interventions shifted the balance of the negotiation. When the call ended, Takeda agreed to redraft the contract with terms that respected Whitmore Global's independence. The executives erupted in relief, some clapping Daniel on the back with forced smiles. Others, however, eyed him with suspicion, their pride stung by how easily he outshone them. Over the next few weeks, Claire gradually gave Daniel more responsibilities. He reviewed international contracts, advised on cross-cultural deals, and attended strategy meetings. But with his rise came enemies, senior executives who saw him as a threat. Among them was Richard Hale, the chief financial officer, a man known for his polished charm and ruthless tactics. To Richard, Daniel was an outsider who didn't belong in the upper echelons. One night, as Daniel left the building, Richard approached him in the parking garage. "Enjoying your little promotion?" he said with a smirk. "Don't get too comfortable. People like you rise fast, you fall faster." Daniel met his gaze steadily. "I'm not here to play your games, Hale. I'm here to do my job." Richard chuckled, a cold, dismissive sound. "We'll see how long that lasts." The tension simmered, unseen by Claire, who was beginning to rely on Daniel more than she realized. She called him into her office late one evening to thank him personally for the company's improved standing with Takeda. "You've done more in weeks than some of my executives have done in years," she admitted. I want to offer you a formal position as an international business consultant. Daniel's heart swelled with gratitude, but he remained humble. Thank you, Ms. Whitmore. I'll do my best. As he left her office, he caught his reflection in the glass door. For the first time in years, he didn't just see a janitor. He saw the man he used to be, and the man he was becoming again. But the road ahead would not be easy. While Daniel's skills were earning him allies, they were also awakening a storm of hidden corruption within Whitmore Global, corruption that would soon come after him. The promotion to international business consultant placed Daniel Rivera in a world he had once abandoned: boardrooms, negotiations, and corporate politics. While Claire Whitmore trusted him, not everyone shared her confidence. The whispers among the executives grew louder. They saw him as an outsider who had bypassed the traditional hierarchy, and their envy hardened into hostility. Despite the cold stares, Daniel focused on his work. His evenings were still spent with his daughter, Sophia, who was now old enough to understand how much he had sacrificed for her. Each night she would ask, "Dad, do they see you now?" And he would smile, answering, "They will." Her belief in him fueled his determination. Weeks passed, and Whitmore Global's negotiations with Takeda Industries reached a critical stage. The revised contract Daniel helped shape promised mutual respect between the companies, but its success depended on a high-profile signing event in Tokyo. Claire announced that Daniel would join the delegation as her key advisor. The decision shocked the other executives, particularly Richard Hale, whose resentment only deepened. Before the Tokyo trip, Daniel uncovered something troubling. While reviewing internal financial documents, he noticed discrepancies. Money quietly siphoned off through shell companies connected to senior executives. The patterns were subtle, almost invisible, but Daniel's sharp eyes caught them. He began compiling evidence, storing copies of every suspicious file. The truth was clear: someone was embezzling millions from the company. Daniel considered going straight to Claire, but he hesitated. He needed more proof. Exposing corruption without airtight evidence could destroy not only his credibility, but also Claire's trust in him. For now, he kept his discovery to himself, working in silence while keeping a careful eye on Richard Hale, who seemed to be at the center of it all. The flight to Tokyo was long and tense. Daniel sat by the window, staring at the clouds while Claire reviewed her notes beside him. "You're quiet," she observed. "Just thinking," Daniel replied. "Deals like this are more than numbers. They're about trust. And trust is fragile." Claire studied him for a moment, then nodded. "You're right. That's why I brought you. You see things others don't." In Tokyo, Daniel's skills shone once again. During a private dinner with Takeda's president, Masato Takeda, he spoke fluent Japanese, sharing cultural references and respect that warmed their hosts. The president was impressed, telling Claire, "Your advisor understands our ways better than most. You are fortunate to have him." The signing ceremony was a success. Cameras flashed, reporters applauded, and the partnership was sealed. Yet amid the celebrations, Daniel noticed something unsettling: a man he didn't recognize watching him from across the room, making a brief phone call before disappearing. The uneasy feeling lingered as the delegation returned to Chicago. Back home, Daniel's suspicions about internal corruption grew. Late at night, he stayed in the office, piecing together a puzzle no one else dared to touch. The deeper he dug, the more he uncovered a network of fraudulent contracts, falsified expenses, and offshore accounts. It wasn't just Richard Hale, it was several senior executives working together, bleeding the company dry. One evening, while Daniel was copying files, the office door creaked open. Richard stood there, his smile cold. "Working late, Rivera? You seem very interested in numbers that don't concern you." Daniel closed his laptop calmly. "Everything in this company concerns me. Especially when it's being stolen." Richard's smirk faded. "You're making a mistake. You think Claire will believe you over us? You're just a janitor she pulled out of the basement. Don't overplay your hand." "I'm not afraid of you," Daniel replied, his voice steady. "The truth will come out." Richard leaned closer, his voice low and venomous. "Then you better hope you're ready for what happens next." The threat hung in the air long after Richard left. Daniel knew he had crossed an invisible line. There was no turning back now. That night, as he walked out of the building, rain pouring down, Daniel looked up at the towering Whitmore Global sign. The company he had saved was rotting from within, and it would fall to him to clean it, not with a mop, but with the truth. The rain that night seemed like an omen. Daniel Rivera returned home soaked, his thoughts spinning as he tucked Sophia into bed. She hugged him tightly and whispered, "Don't let them scare you, Dad." Her words gave him strength, but he knew the battle ahead would be dangerous. The men he was investigating had power, and they would not hesitate to crush anyone who threatened them. The following morning at Whitmore Global, Daniel sensed the shift. Conversation stopped when he entered the room. Emails that once flowed freely now avoided his inbox. Even Claire Whitmore, though still supportive, appeared distracted, dealing with growing tensions among her leadership team. Richard Hale and his allies had begun their counterattack, subtle moves designed to isolate Daniel, to make him appear unreliable. That afternoon, an anonymous email appeared in Claire's inbox. It contained an old news article about Daniel's wrongful embezzlement charge from years ago, an accusation that had cost him his first career. Although he had been cleared of all wrongdoing, the damage had been done back then, and now it was being used to poison Claire's trust in him. She called Daniel into her office, the article open on her screen. "Why didn't you tell me about this?" she asked, her tone caught between concern and suspicion. Daniel's jaw tightened. "Because it was a lie. I was set up by people who didn't want me to uncover what they were doing. The charges were dropped, but the damage to my name stuck. I didn't want my past to overshadow what I can do now." Claire studied him in silence, her expression unreadable. Finally she said, "I believe you. But understand, others will use this to discredit you. Be careful." That night, Daniel returned to his secret investigation with renewed determination. He began assembling a comprehensive dossier, every piece of evidence linking Richard Hale and his network to fraudulent accounts. He reached out to the only person he could trust outside the company, Dr. Hiroshi Sato, his former mentor in Japan. Through encrypted calls, Sato advised him on how to trace hidden financial trails without alerting those responsible. Meanwhile, Richard and his allies grew bolder. They started planting rumors, accusing Daniel of manipulating deals for personal gain. In meetings, they subtly undermined his ideas, twisting facts to make him appear reckless. Yet Daniel remained calm, countering every move with quiet precision. He had been underestimated once, and he would not let it happen again. One evening, Claire invited Daniel to a private dinner at a quiet restaurant. "I wanted to thank you," she said, "for what you've done so far. But I also need to know, are you prepared for what's coming? These people won't go down without a fight." Daniel nodded, his voice steady. "I've faced worse. And I won't stop until the truth is out." Their conversation was interrupted when a man at a nearby table discreetly snapped a photo of them. Daniel noticed immediately, his instincts on high alert. The man quickly left, leaving behind a sense of unease. Someone was watching him, tracking his every move. The next day, an internal audit was suddenly announced, an attempt by Richard to shift attention and frame Daniel as the culprit. But instead of panicking, Daniel used the audit to his advantage. When the auditors came, he provided them with carefully prepared documents, evidence that pointed toward the real thieves. It was a risky move, but it planted seeds of doubt where Richard least expected it. Days later, Daniel stayed late at the office again, finalizing the report that could expose everything. As he worked, the lights flickered and the building fell silent. Footsteps echoed in the corridor. When he turned, he found two men in suits, Richard's associates, blocking the exit. "You've been busy, Rivera," one of them said with a sneer. "Too busy." Daniel's heart pounded, but he stood his ground. "You think you can scare me into silence?" They stepped closer, one of them lowering his voice. "This is your last warning. Walk away, or you and your daughter will regret it." The mention of Sophia lit a fire in Daniel's eyes. Touch her, and you'll have nowhere to hide, he growled. The men smirked and walked away, leaving the threat hanging in the air. Daniel locked the office door and backed up his files on multiple drives. The stakes had risen. It was no longer just about saving the company. It was about protecting the only family he had left. As he left the building that night, he whispered to himself, "They think they can break me. They have no idea who they're dealing with." The storm was coming, and Daniel was ready to face it head on. The threats against Daniel Rivera had only strengthened his resolve. That night, he barely slept, instead piecing together every shred of evidence he had collected. Each document, email, and transaction formed a web of corruption so intricate it took his breath away. These men had been stealing millions for years, hiding their crimes behind layers of corporate complexity. But Daniel now had the map that led straight to them. The next morning, he met with Claire Whitmore privately. She noticed the dark circles under his eyes but said nothing, waiting for him to speak. Daniel placed a thick folder on her desk. "These are the documents I've gathered. Proof of embezzlement by several senior executives, including Richard Hale. They've been siphoning funds through fake subsidiaries and offshore accounts." Claire flipped through the papers, her expression tightening with every page. "If this is true," she muttered, "this isn't just theft, it's betrayal." "It is true," Daniel said firmly. "But exposing them won't be easy. They'll fight back with everything they have." Claire closed the folder, her voice steady. "Then we'll fight harder." They devised a plan, quietly build an unassailable case before making any moves. Daniel would continue gathering evidence while Claire arranged for discreet legal and forensic audits. But the executives suspected something was brewing. The pressure intensified. Meetings turned hostile, whispers followed Daniel in the hallways, and his access to certain files was suddenly restricted. Yet he stayed one step ahead, finding alternative ways to track their schemes. Amid this tension, Daniel received a call from Dr. Hiroshi Sato. "You must be careful, Daniel," his mentor warned. "Men who hide such crimes will not hesitate to destroy you to keep their secrets." "I know," Daniel replied. "But this isn't just about me. They're bleeding the company dry, and they think they're untouchable. That ends now." One evening, while reviewing security footage from the finance department, Daniel noticed something suspicious. Richard Hale slipping into an office after hours, removing documents, and leaving with a briefcase. Using his connections in the IT department, Daniel obtained copies of the deleted files. They were damning, proof that Richard had been covering his tracks, erasing evidence that could incriminate him. The following day, during a board meeting, Daniel sat silently as Richard presented a falsified financial report. Halfway through, Daniel stood and calmly placed a USB drive on the table. "Before we continue," he said, "there's something the board needs to see." Richard's eyes widened as the screen lit up with evidence Daniel had compiled: unauthorized transfers, fake invoices, secret accounts. Gasps filled the room as the truth unfolded. Richard's face turned pale, but he quickly regained his composure, forcing a smile. "This is fabrication. He's trying to frame me because he wants my position." Daniel didn't flinch. "Check the files yourself. The digital signatures, the timestamps, they don't lie." Before anyone could respond, security entered the room with Claire's authorization. "Richard Hale, you're suspended pending investigation," the head of security announced. Richard glared at Daniel, his voice dripping with venom. "You think this is over, Rivera? You've just made the biggest mistake of your life." As Richard was escorted out, the boardroom fell silent. Claire turned to Daniel, her voice low but firm. "You've done more than save this company. You've exposed its darkest secrets." But Daniel knew this was only the beginning. The corruption ran deeper than Richard alone. The network was larger, with hidden allies still in the shadows. That night, while driving home, a black car followed him for several miles before vanishing into the darkness. The message was clear: the fight was far from over. When Daniel walked into his home, Sophia ran to hug him, unaware of the danger looming over them. Holding her close, he whispered, "I'll keep you safe. No matter what. As he looked out the window into the night, his reflection stared back with a mixture of exhaustion and determination. The storm had broken, and there was no turning back. The days following Richard Hale's suspension were chaotic. The media caught wind of the scandal, and headlines exploded across business networks. Whitmore Global rocked by embezzlement probe. Reporters swarmed outside the building, asking questions Claire refused to answer. Internally, fear spread among employees, and many wondered who would fall next. Daniel Rivera became both a hero and a target, admired by some, hated by those still loyal to the old regime. Though Richard was gone, his influence lingered. Allies he had planted in various departments began sabotaging Daniel's efforts. Files went missing, key witnesses suddenly retracted statements, and anonymous emails accused Daniel of orchestrating the scandal himself. Each day felt like walking through a minefield. Claire called Daniel into her office late one evening. "The board is divided," she admitted. "Some believe in you, others think you're the reason for all this chaos. If we don't end this quickly, they'll force me to cut ties with you." Daniel's jaw tightened. "Let them think what they want. The truth is on our side. But we need to move fast before they destroy the evidence completely." That night, Daniel worked until dawn, piecing together the last fragments of the conspiracy. He discovered that Richard hadn't acted alone. There was another powerful figure behind the scheme, someone outside the company who laundered the stolen funds through overseas accounts. The name he uncovered sent chills down his spine: Victor Kane, a former Whitmore executive with deep connections to organized crime. Richard had been working for him all along. Daniel knew exposing Victor Kane would be dangerous. Kane wasn't just a businessman, he was ruthless, the kind of man who made people disappear. Yet Daniel pressed forward, arranging a secret meeting with an investigative journalist he trusted. Under the cover of night, he handed over the evidence against Kane, knowing it was his best chance to bring the truth to light. But word of his actions leaked. The next evening, as Daniel walked to his car in the underground garage, two men stepped out from the shadows, Kane's enforcers. One grabbed him by the collar, slamming him against the wall. "You've been digging where you shouldn't," the man growled. "Kane doesn't like rats." Daniel winced but kept his voice steady. "Tell Kane this, his time is up. People like him always fall." The second man pulled a knife, pressing it against Daniel's ribs. "Walk away, Rivera, or we'll make sure your daughter pays the price." Rage surged through Daniel, but he knew he couldn't fight them there. He glared at the men, his voice cold. "Touch her, and I'll bury you all." They shoved him to the ground and disappeared into the night, leaving him shaken but unbroken. That moment hardened his resolve. If Kane wanted a war, Daniel would give him one. The next day, the investigative journalists published a damning exposé based on Daniel's evidence. The article named Victor Kane as the mastermind behind the embezzlement ring, and revealed his connections to criminal enterprises. The report sent shockwaves through the business world and caught the attention of federal authorities. Investigations were launched, and suddenly Kane was the hunted one. But the victory came at a price. That night, Daniel's apartment was broken into. He arrived home to find drawers ransacked, furniture overturned, and a message spray-painted on the wall. "Stop or she's next." His heart raced as he searched for Sophia, only to find her hiding in the closet, trembling. He held her tightly, whispering, "I've got you. They won't touch you. I promise." Claire insisted on placing them under security protection, assigning bodyguards to watch over Sophia while Daniel continued his work. For the first time, he saw genuine fear in Claire's eyes, not for herself, but for him. "You're risking everything," she said quietly. "Why do you keep going?" Daniel looked at her, his voice calm but unshakable. "Because people like Kane think they can destroy lives and get away with it. I won't let them. Not anymore." The tension in the city grew as federal agents closed in on Kane's network. Yet Daniel knew the final confrontation was coming. He would have to face the man behind the shadows, the one who had orchestrated his fall years ago, and was now trying to finish the job. That night, as rain lashed against his window, Daniel stood silently, staring at the storm. The reflection in the glass no longer showed the broken janitor of old. It showed a man reborn in fire, ready to end the fight he had been forced into. The storm outside mirrored the chaos closing in on Daniel Rivera's life. Federal agents now actively pursued Victor Kane, but Kane was a ghost, slipping through jurisdictions, protected by a network of fear. Meanwhile, Daniel lived under constant surveillance, his every step shadowed by security. Sophia clung to him more tightly than ever, sensing the danger despite his calm reassurances. Inside Whitmore Global, the board was split. Some praised Daniel as the savior of the company, while others accused him of provoking the scandal that had tarnished their name. Claire Whitmore, however, remained steadfast. "You've uncovered what no one else dared to see," she told him during a private meeting. "If we stand together, we can clean this company for good." Daniel nodded, but his expression was grim. "Kane won't go down quietly. He has people everywhere. Even here." Indeed, the deeper Daniel dug, the clearer it became that Kane's influence reached into law enforcement, corporate circles, and even the media. False reports began surfacing, portraying Daniel as a disgruntled employee seeking revenge. Threatening letters arrived at his home, some containing photos of Sophia at school. Every tactic was meant to break him. But Daniel refused to bend. One night, federal agent Rebecca Mills, who had been assigned to the Kane investigation, visited Daniel. "You've stirred up a hornet's nest," she said. "But you've also given us something we've been chasing for years. Kane's organization is crumbling, we just need one last piece to nail him." Daniel pulled out a flash drive. "This is it. Offshore transactions linking Kane directly to the stolen funds. He used Whitmore Global as a laundering front." Agent Mills studied him. "You realize giving this to us makes you a primary target. He'll come after you harder." Daniel's voice was calm. "Let him come. I've been running from ghosts long enough." The next day, Claire announced a press conference to publicly address the scandal. She insisted Daniel stand beside her, despite his objections. "The world needs to see the man who stood up to corruption," she said. Cameras flashed as she spoke of the company's commitment to transparency and integrity, crediting Daniel for his bravery. The moment was powerful, but it also painted a target on his back. That night, as Daniel drove home under heavy rain, a black SUV appeared in his rearview mirror. He tried to shake it, taking sharp turns, but the vehicle stayed close. Suddenly it rammed his car, forcing him onto a deserted side street. His vehicle skidded, crashing against a fence. Dazed but conscious, Daniel saw figures approaching, Kane's men. They pulled him from the wreck, dragging him into the rain-soaked street. One of them sneered. "Kane sends his regards. This ends tonight." Daniel, battered but defiant, spat blood onto the pavement. "Tell Kane, he's already lost." Before the men could strike, headlights flooded the street. FBI vehicles screeched to a halt. Agents stormed out, guns raised. The attackers fled, but 2 were captured on the spot. Agent Mills rushed to Daniel's side. "You're lucky we were tracking them. Kane's desperate now." Daniel struggled to his feet, rain dripping down his face. "This ends soon." The arrest of Kane's men gave investigators the leverage they needed. One of the captured enforcers, fearing prison, agreed to testify. Through his confession, they pinpointed Kane's location, an abandoned estate on the outskirts of the city where he had been hiding. When Daniel learned of it, he insisted on being there when the raid happened. Mills initially refused, but his determination convinced her. "You have 30 seconds to stand back when we go in," she warned. "No heroics." Under a moonlit sky, the FBI surrounded the estate. The air was thick with tension. Daniel stood behind the agents, watching as they breached the gates. Gunfire erupted inside, followed by shouts. Moments later, agents dragged Victor Kane out in handcuffs. Even in defeat, Kane's eyes burned with hatred. "You think this changes anything?" Kane snarled at Daniel. "There will always be men like me." Daniel stepped closer, his voice steady. "Maybe. But not here. Not anymore. The agents hauled Kane away, his threats fading into the night. Daniel felt the weight of years lift from his shoulders. The man who had orchestrated his fall was finally finished. As dawn broke, Daniel returned home to Sophia. She ran into his arms, tears streaming down her face. "It's over?" she asked. "Yes, Mija," he said softly. "It's over." But deep down, Daniel knew this victory was only part of the journey. There were still wounds to heal, reputations to rebuild, and a company to reform. Yet for the first time in years, hope felt real. Victor Kane's arrest sent shockwaves through the corporate world. News outlets hailed the takedown as a landmark victory against organized crime and corporate fraud. Daniel Rivera's name appeared in headlines, often accompanied by phrases like, "The janitor who saved Whitmore Global." Yet, while the public celebrated, Daniel remained cautious. Kane was behind bars, but the remnants of his network still lurked in the shadows, and Whitmore Global was far from healed. The following week, Daniel attended a board meeting that felt unlike any before. Several corrupt executives had resigned in disgrace, while others were under investigation. For the first time, the boardroom was free of Richard Hale's poisonous presence. Claire Whitmore, standing at the head of the table, announced, "With Kane gone and the truth exposed, we now have an opportunity to rebuild, not just our reputation, but our culture. And Daniel Rivera will lead that change." Gasps rippled through the room as Claire revealed her decision to appoint Daniel as interim chief operating officer. Some board members resisted, their pride stung, but Claire's authority silenced them. Daniel rose slowly, his voice calm. "I never asked for this position. But if you trust me, I'll dedicate myself to making this company something every employee can be proud of." After the meeting, Daniel walked through the halls where he had once pushed a janitor's cart. Employees stopped to thank him, some even applauding quietly. For the first time, they looked at him with respect, not pity. The feeling was overwhelming, but Daniel carried it with humility. At home, Sophia baked him a small cake with COO written in shaky icing. "You're finally where you deserve to be, Dad," she said with a proud smile. Daniel hugged her tightly. "I'm here because of you, Sophia. You're my reason." But victory came with new responsibilities. Daniel began implementing reforms within Whitmore Global, stricter compliance measures, whistleblower protections, and open forums where employees could voice concerns without fear. Slowly, trust returned to the company. Yet not everyone welcomed the changes. Former allies of Richard Hale and Kane still tried to sabotage his efforts from the shadows, leaking misleading stories to the media and stirring doubts about his leadership. One evening, Claire invited Daniel to her penthouse to discuss the challenges ahead. Over dinner, she admitted, "When I first mocked you, I had no idea who you really were. You've changed not only this company but me as well. I've learned that leadership isn't about control, it's about trust." Daniel smiled faintly. "We both learned something through this. People aren't defined by where they start, but by what they do when they're tested." The two shared a rare moment of mutual respect. But their peace was short-lived. The next day, an investigative reporter approached Daniel with disturbing news. There were rumors that federal agents had uncovered a hidden account tied to his name. The accusation was a clear setup, an attempt by Kane's remaining allies to discredit him. Daniel immediately turned the information over to Agent Mills. "This is fabricated," he said. "But they won't stop until they destroy me completely." Mills reassured him. "We'll trace this back to whoever's framing you. They're desperate, Daniel. That's why they're lashing out." Despite the smear attempt, the evidence cleared Daniel's name within days. The attack had failed, but it reminded him how fragile his position remained. As COO, he would have to remain vigilant, not just against external threats, but against those inside the company who feared the new order he was creating. Weeks later, federal agents arrested the last of Kane's network, finally severing the ties of corruption that had haunted Whitmore Global for years. With the threat gone, Daniel felt a weight lift from his shoulders. At a company-wide meeting, he addressed the employees directly. "We've been through darkness together. But from this moment forward, No one in this company will be overlooked, dismissed, or silenced. Every voice matters, no matter where you stand. I know because I was once invisible too." The applause that followed was thunderous. That evening, Daniel walked through the quiet halls of the building he had once cleaned. The smell of polished floors and faint hum of lights filled the air, reminding him of how far he had come. He paused by the janitorial closet, the place where his journey had begun, and placed his hand on the door. "Thank you," he whispered to the shadows of his past. Outside, as the city lights sparkled against the night sky, Daniel felt a profound sense of peace. The battle was over, but the journey of rebuilding had only begun. Months passed since the final arrests, and under Daniel Rivera's leadership, Whitmore Global began to flourish. Employee morale soared, investors regained confidence, and the media praised the company's dramatic turnaround. Yet even as the company thrived, Daniel's life remained anything but simple. One evening, while reviewing reports in his office, he received an unexpected visitor, Claire Whitmore. She appeared tense, holding a file. "Daniel, there's something you need to see," she said, placing the file on his desk. Inside were documents suggesting that a foreign partner, with whom they were about to finalize a major deal, was using hidden clauses to manipulate the contract. It was eerily similar to the Japanese merger trap he had uncovered months ago. Daniel scanned the papers, his expression hardening. "They're trying to play us the same way Takeda Industries almost did. If we sign this, they'll own controlling rights to our intellectual property." Claire sighed. "You're the only one who can stop this. The board trusts you now, but they're also pushing for this deal. They think it's the key to expansion." Daniel leaned back, thinking. "We'll renegotiate, but this time on our terms. No hidden traps." Meanwhile, his personal life became complicated. Sophia, now more aware of the threats he had faced, grew anxious every time he left home. "I just want you safe," she told him one night as they sat on the couch. Daniel held her close. "I promise, Mija, I'm not going anywhere. I fought too hard to leave you now." As the deal negotiations approached, Daniel traveled to London to meet with the foreign partner. The talks were tense, with the other side attempting to mask their true intentions under layers of legal jargon. Daniel, with his sharp linguistic and cultural understanding, dismantled their tactics piece by piece. At the final meeting, he placed a revised contract on the table. "These are our terms. Fair. Transparent. If you value partnership, you'll sign this instead." The executives exchanged glances, clearly defeated. Eventually they signed, agreeing to Daniel's terms. Whitmore Global secured a deal that was both profitable and ethical. But back in Chicago, shadows from the past resurfaced. Richard Hale, awaiting trial, gave an explosive interview to the press, claiming that Daniel had orchestrated the corruption to frame him and Kane. Though his claims were baseless, they reignited old rumors. Social media swirled with doubt, and some shareholders began to panic. Claire stood by Daniel publicly stating, "Richard Hale is a disgraced man grasping at straws. Daniel Rivera saved this company." End of discussion. Still, the smear campaign rattled Daniel. It felt like no matter how many battles he won, his past would always haunt him. Then came the final twist. Victor Kane, despite being imprisoned, managed to send Daniel a handwritten letter through one of his connections. The letter was brief but chilling. "You may have taken my freedom, but you'll never take the fear I planted in you. Watch your back, Rivera. The world has more wolves than you think." Daniel burned the letter in his fireplace that night, watching the flames consume Kane's words. He would not let fear control him. As winter settled over Chicago, Whitmore Global held its annual gala to celebrate the company's rebirth. Employees, investors, and media gathered in the Grand Hall, where Daniel was to give the keynote speech. He stood at the podium, scanning the faces before him. Many had once doubted him, but now they looked at him with admiration. "My journey here wasn't easy," he began. "I started in this company cleaning floors. No one saw me then. But I learned something. Greatness doesn't come from titles or positions, it comes from integrity, from standing up when it's hardest. This company is proof that when you value every person and every truth, no enemy can destroy you." The applause was deafening. Among the crowd, Sophia watched with pride, her eyes shining. That night, as father and daughter walked home through the softly falling snow, Daniel felt a rare peace. He had survived the storms, faced the wolves, and emerged stronger. For the first time in years, the future felt safe. But he also knew one thing: life had a way of testing even the strongest. And if the world ever tried to break him again, he was ready. The following spring, Whitmore Global stood as a symbol of transformation. Under Daniel Rivera's leadership, the company not only regained its former strength but rose to new heights, becoming a model of ethical business practices. The media dubbed the turnaround the Rivera effect. Yet for Daniel, it wasn't about headlines or recognition. It was about keeping his promise, to himself, to Sophia, and to the countless employees who now worked in a company where honesty mattered. Still, remnants of the past clung to him. Richard Hale's trial approached, and Daniel was called to testify. Facing his old adversary in the courtroom stirred memories of every humiliation, every threat he had endured. Richard glared at him with burning hatred, but Daniel stood firm, delivering clear, undeniable testimony that sealed Richard's fate. When the verdict came, guilty on all counts, Daniel felt no triumph, only a quiet sense of justice served. After the trial, Claire Whitmore invited Daniel to her office. "The board has voted," she said with a small smile. "They want you to stay as Chief Operating Officer permanently, and I want you by my side as we continue rebuilding." Daniel accepted with gratitude, but also with humility. "Titles don't change who I am. What matters is doing the right thing." In the months that followed, Daniel focused on mentoring young employees, sharing his story to inspire them. He created new training programs and implemented scholarships for workers' families, ensuring no hidden talent went unnoticed the way his had. Under his watch, Whitmore Global became not just profitable, but human. At home, life was finally peaceful. Sophia, blossoming into a bright young woman, began planning for college. One evening, as they sat on their balcony watching the sunset, she said softly, "You're my hero, Dad. Not because of your job, but because you never gave up." Daniel's eyes glistened. "Everything I did was for you, Mija. You kept me going when the world tried to break me." As summer approached, Claire organized a special event at the company's headquarters, a ceremony to honor Daniel's contributions. The hall was filled with employees, press, and community leaders. Claire stepped to the microphone first. "Today, we celebrate a man who reminded us what true leadership is. Daniel Rivera is proof that no one is ever just their title. He's proof that integrity can change everything." When Daniel approached the stage, applause erupted like thunder. He paused, looking over the crowd, and spoke with heartfelt sincerity. "I once cleaned these halls, invisible to the world. I was overlooked, underestimated, even mocked. But I learned that no matter how others see you, what matters is how you see yourself. When you choose to stand for truth, no force can keep you down. This company's future is bright, not because of me, but because we all chose to rise above fear and corruption. Thank you for believing in me, and for believing in each other." The standing ovation lasted several minutes. Later that night, after the event ended, Daniel walked alone through the quiet building. He stopped by the janitor's closet where his journey began. With a bittersweet smile, he whispered, "We made it." Then he turned and walked toward the elevator, leaving the past behind. Outside, the city skyline glowed against the night sky. Daniel breathed deeply, feeling the weight of years finally lift. The man who once lived in the shadows now stood in the light, redeemed, respected, and at peace. As he walked home to Sophia, the streets seemed warmer, the world softer. He had not just survived, he had transformed. His story, born from pain and perseverance, would live on as a beacon for those who felt unseen. And in the quiet of that night, Daniel Rivera knew he had finally won, not just the battles against corruption, but the war within himself.